Okay, hey YouTube. So this video is what I was going to talk about last week, but I'll talk about very quickly now before I get on down to the bar to watch Vanderbilt play in the College World Series against Virginia. So go Doors, anchor down, come back with another title. But this video is not related to baseball or sports at all. It's related to the idea of transracial and comparing that to transgender. And so, as many of you are probably familiar, there was a story in the media the past couple of weeks about a woman named Rachel Dolezal who was basically pretending to be black. And a lot of people drew comparisons between her and Caitlyn Jenner in the transgender community by saying that Caitlyn and trans women are really just men pretending to be women, like Rachel was pretending to be black. And their arguments tend to really focus on the fact that um, either trans people and transracial people are both sort of invalid identities, or they're both valid identities because gender is a social construct just like race, right? Um, Except that's not entirely true. While race is purely a social structure based off of skin tone and then perceived shared physical traits uh, within populations which aren't really shared at all, there is no trait that is universally common to any group of humans based off of skin tone, whether that's hair, eye color, the shape of your face, anything like that. Yes, there are some features that are kind of prevalent throughout those communities, but there's none that are ubiquitous. So race is not hereditary, it is entirely a social construct. However, gender is somewhat innate and it is also social. And so while we think of things like gender roles, like pink is for girls, blue is for boys, um, you know, the men are supposed to be the providers, the women are the nurturers, things like that. Gender roles or gender stereotypes are social constructs. What is not a social construct is how your body or the self kind of processes your physiology and your psychology. Because if you change your hormones, so if you are a cisgender man, a man who is not trans, and you start taking estrogen and testosterone blockers, that's going to create a lot of problems for you, both personally as well as kind of how you interact with other people. And so gender is not entirely a social construct, because how you process and react to those hormones would change even if you weren't interacting with other people. And so this is why we say that your gender identity is innate to you as an individual, um, whereas your gender expression is something that is much more informed kind of by the society that you live in. But the gender identity uh, for me is female or woman, um, just like the gender identity for somebody like Ellen or somebody who is much more butch. Um, but that doesn't mean that any of us are more or less female or more or less of a woman than any of the others. It just means that we have different ways of expressing our gender identity, um, you know, than each other, and than we would if we grew up in, say, a Swedish or South American household, because our relationships with society and ourselves would be quite a bit different. And it's really kind of that simple. I think a lot of the other arguments kind of are, trying to prove that somehow all these arguments that um, trans exclusionary radical feminists or conservative bigots have been using are now valid, because when a liberal or a trans activist denies this sort of transracial idea, then they say, well, how is this argument any different than the ones we use against transgender people? And so they think that they've caught the trans community or the liberal community in some kind of, catch-22 where either all identities are valid, uh, which renders them kind of meaningless, or these identities aren't valid, which, furthers their political goals, when the reality is that they're making a false equivalency between these two completely different ideas, um, to try to put us in some sort of trap while ignoring the fact that gender is not kind of as simply defined as whether or not you wear a dress or pants to work. It goes much more beyond that.